You look around, maybe scroll through your phone, and you see the guys you went to school with posting about their big promotions, their new houses, their seemingly perfect, well-ordered lives. And if you're a certain kind of man, I know exactly what happens. Something just tightens right up in your chest. Let me tell you, it isn't jealousy. Not at all. It's a quiet, haunting crisis. You drive home, you do what needs to be done, and you just bury that feeling under the massive weight of your daily responsibilities. Well, in this explainer, we're diving deep into the heavy, unseen psychological realities of men who build their lives a little differently.
This is the exact question that keeps you up at night, isn't it? What in the world did they figure out that I didn't? We've really got to validate that heavy, buried feeling right off the bat. You feel like you've been completely left behind while everyone else just effortlessly glides through life, checking off all those standard boxes of success in their 20s and 30s. It feels like you're endlessly pouring concrete for a foundation while everyone else has already moved into the house, right? But what if I told you that the very reason you feel quote-unquote behind is the exact reason you're actually being forged for a level of capability they will literally never reach? Society loves to tell us that if you haven't made it by 30, well, you failed. But the legendary psychologist Carl Jung completely dismantled that whole idea. He warned us that the rarest personalities on Earth are not built for early success, they are actually built for late emergence. If you're a man who's been through too much, who handles crises quietly while feeling light years behind the pack, I need you to hear this heavy truth. You are not broken. You are not failing. You are actually undergoing a brutal but absolutely necessary process of psychological incubation.
Act 1. The Illusion of the Broken Man.
Now, before we can even begin to analyze your success, we have to look at the raw mechanics of your survival. When a guy has been through relentless stress, real profound loss, and the kind of heavy pressure that doesn't even have a clean name, he rarely breaks where people can see it. Instead, his nervous system literally restructures itself. He doesn't necessarily become healed in the traditional sense. He becomes operational. He becomes entirely functional under a massive load. When things get bad, he doesn't panic because his system learned a long time ago that panic simply isn't an option when you're the one who has to hold the whole operation together.
There is a massive disconnect here between perception and reality. From the outside, this man looks cold, composed, maybe even unemotional. He handles difficult news with a steadiness that actually makes other people feel calm. But from the inside, well, he isn't just naturally calm. He's completely checked out of the habit of expecting things to go smoothly. He doesn't get rattled because, honestly, he already ran the absolute worst-case scenario in his head before he even had his morning coffee. He isn't calm, he's prepared. And notice how that survival instinct manifests in everyday life. You're going to see extreme precision over the small things. The tire pressure gets checked every single Sunday. The workspace stays meticulously organized. Calls are returned exactly when promised, right on the dot. Why is that? Because when the rest of his life was chaotic, uncertain, and completely out of his hands, extreme reliability over these tiny actions became his anchor. It was quite literally the only thing he could actually control.
People so often misread this kind of man as unfeeling, but it's translation, not absence. Look, he might lack the emotional vocabulary to give you some poetic speech about love, but showing up at 3 a.m. to help you fix a flat tire or making sure your oil is checked before you take a long road trip, that is his direct translation of love into action. The feelings haven't disappeared at all, they've just been converted into pure utility.
But let's be real. Living as the load-bearing pillar for everyone else definitely takes a toll. It creates what I'd call a functional allergy to dependence. He is incredibly independent, but it's not out of pride or ego. It's a learned instinct. He simply stopped asking for help because asking went unanswered way too many times in the past. His nervous system basically just stopped making the request.
Act 2. The Jungian Incubation.
So you might be wondering, how does a man this reliable and capable end up lagging behind his peers? Well, it all comes down to what Carl Jung called individuation. Now, for most folks, building an identity is pretty easy. They just absorb the external world, copy the goals society hands them, pick a lane, and go. But the rare personality, they just cannot do this. Individuation requires the slow, often painful removal of everything false. It demands a necessary delay of external commitment so you don't end up building your entire life on a fragile, unexamined ego.
For this man, his inner compass is so highly sensitive that if he tries to step into a career or a role that just isn't authentic to him, his entire psyche actively resists it. He simply cannot commit his whole weight to something that feels false. So what happens? He hesitates, he wanders a bit. He might even quit jobs that look absolutely perfect on paper simply because the shape of that life feels suffocating to him.
The absolute crucial point here is captured perfectly in Jung's warning. He said, "What adapts too easily often lacks a true self." Adapting too easily to society's timeline often results in a life that quietly, invisibly collapses from the inside. Those guys you see having devastating midlife crises at 45, suddenly buying bright red sports cars they definitely don't need, those are very often the guys who succeeded way too early on a completely false foundation.
Think about it like this. While those early achievers spent their 20s building social structures, accumulating fancy job titles, status, and all that public applause, the late emerger was doing something entirely different. He was unconsciously building an unbreakable psychological structure. Now, that gap between what he sensed he was capable of and what he had actually built so far, to everyone else that just looked like emptiness. But in reality, it was immense pressure. And as we all know, pressure over enough time completely changes the material.
Act 3. Becoming psychologically unbribable.
This right here is exactly where that long delay finally pays off. Just think about the internal milestones this guy achieved during all that time. He went through ego dissolution, which really just means he stopped defining himself by external applause. He underwent shadow integration, a fancy psychological way of saying he faced his own darkness and his own failures head-on to forge some unbreakable depth. He didn't build his life on a bed of denial, he built it on solid truth. And then as he reaches his 40s and 50s, a truly profound shift happens. The urgency just completely disappears. That desperate, clawing need to prove something, to match everyone else's timeline, it simply vanishes. And in its place, a highly functional, almost surgical deliberateness takes over. The man who couldn't seem to commit to anything in his 30s suddenly starts making choices with a precision that absolutely stuns the people around him.
And this is the ultimate result. He becomes psychologically unbribable. Because his identity is no longer hanging on the approval of others, he just can't be controlled by the usual rewards or fears anymore. Praise doesn't intoxicate him, and criticism sure doesn't destabilize him. He's already survived the hardest thing imaginable, becoming himself without asking for anyone's permission.
Because of all this deep work, he emerges as a natural, deeply anchored leader. He possesses authority, but without domination. He doesn't need to force compliance or raise his voice to get a room's attention. People listen because something about his presence just feels incredibly solid. He is firmly rooted in decades of unseen internal labor, and folks can sense that a mile away.
The final evolution.
Now, there is a single, vital choice this man still has to make. The only thing that can truly kill a late emergence is the story you tell yourself about your own past. If you look back at those wandering years and measure them against someone else's false timelines, if you sit there and call them wasted time, you are going to poison your own foundation. The men who truly arrive make a very different move. They look at the past as a necessary, detailed record of exactly how they were built.
You've absolutely got to stop carrying your past around as evidence of failure. You are not broken. Your foundation was just incredibly expensive to build. Those lonely, lost years, those jobs that just didn't fit, that immense feeling of isolation, they stress-tested a psychological foundation that will now actually hold real weight. Sure, it was a costly process, but it bought you an inner coherence that those early achievers rarely, if ever, find. So, I'm going to leave you with this final thought to chew on. Are you building a life that will actually hold up when the real pressure comes, or are you rushing to build one that will feel entirely hollow the exact moment you arrive? Look, your delay was never a weakness. It was the ultimate preparation. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Now get out there and keep building.